So, firstly, before I even say anything else, let me just quickly say this is probably, if anyone has been tracking with our normal schedule, the last thing I did was with Todd Bordeaux. Did you watch that? What did you think of
Yeah,
that?
I listened to that one
Cool.
podcast. Yeah.
That was cool. So, but then I just didn't do anything else. So we've just gone dark for a while, and that's because just a whole bunch of reasons, just busy, and maybe it's the lockdown thing coming back to normal. I don't know, but I'm working it out slowly but surely. And what you should appreciate in this episode is this beautifully smooth internet that we got going. So you see how there's wisdom in just waiting a little bit and waiting till we.
The buffer's got a big backup now.
Yeah, totally. So I'm coming across good to you though, right? I'm
Yeah,
smooth as a baby's bum, right? Yeah. Really, it can't be from my side. So if we have a problem, it is Nick's fault, and that's just, I think I've never been as confident as I am on that point. But so anyway, so we'll start locking and loading a little bit more now. Sorry for the wait. If you usually just do kind of I don't know, just press play for your regular podcast there, but that one with Todd was cool. I enjoyed that. It was good hearing his story.
Cool.
And
I actually downloaded his demon
yeah,
thesis.
me too.
Started reading it.
I read it
Yeah.
a while back. Yeah, it was great. I loved it.
Yeah, a lot
so
of agreement.
I was actually. Did you write something about divorce? Or I know you did your honors in it.
Yeah, I was going to do my master's thesis on divorce. Did a heap of research, gathered all the books, all the quotes, and then once I'd cracked the case, I'm like, well, I don't need to do my master's anymore. I know what I believe now. So
that's what happened to John Framer. Oh no, it wasn't quite that. He had a similar experience with his PhD. It's funny, like he gets the whole thing laid out, and then he's like, nah. It's just like I could so easily see that happening. But anyway, so yeah, I know we've talked a lot about the divorce thing, and you've got some unique takes on. So yeah, it'd be interesting to even get him back on and talk through that, and you can be on for that or whatever. Yeah, so we can look at that later. For anyone who cares as well, and I've got a few interesting little chats set up as we're climbing into the rest of that Klein and Neo-Calvinism thing. I know a guy got introduced to a guy through Chris who would consider Klein to be kind of a kind of neo-Calvinist. So very interesting guy, knows a lot about Doyevit, and he's willing to come on the show. So I'm just trying to read up enough so that I can make an intelligent conversation partner when we're able to talk it through. It'd be very helpful for me, but I'm excited to hear his angle. So stay tuned if you want to check that out. We'll get to that eventually. And then, of course, we've got all the rioting going on in the meantime and lockdown off, and we thought we'd be just something super relevant because we want to stay on top of it, and we always want to be cutting edge relevant. So we thought we'd do Augustine's Confessions.
Yeah, the African theologian.
That is just, I didn't even see that. And now I understand why it is relevant. Absolutely. Okay. So obviously we're being sarcastic. It's relevant always, but we could talk about two kingdoms, or we could just do two kingdoms. We could just forget about it all and press on with our heavenly home. Augustine's Confessions. We've been waiting to get to this one. In fact, I was just thinking about it. Of all the things we've read thus far, in the series, I mean, it's just a marked improvement as you get to this, isn't it?
Oh.
It's just unbelievable. You're just kind of like, you really are. You're sort of working with it before this.
Yeah.
But Augustine's Confessions, it's just like, it's an easy read. It's a nice read. It's a soul-stimulating
beneficial
read.
To the soul read, yeah.
It's amazing. Totally. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So I don't think Augustine needs too much introduction. But, it's probably worth just keeping to our usual form, just to kind of say a few points. I think it's especially with this book, Confessions, because I know the one thing that this is, the why it's so big in Calvinist circles is because he wrote this in light of his fresh appreciation of grace. I mean, he kind of started out Arminian in a very anachronistic sense, and then only later did he get to his Pelagius. Yeah, there was a little double flick back. But then only later did he get to his, big debacle with Pelagius. And then, but it was only after he refined his thought on this idea of making the first move, God making the first move, what we would think of as a normal sort of Calvinism now, that led him to recount his whole sort of experience again, and in light of this fresh appreciation. So in that sense, it's like, it's very reformed. Again, excuse the anachronism. But,
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe a few facts about his life to put people in the picture.
Yep.
So he was born to a Christian mother and a pagan father.
Mm-hmm.
His mother's name was Monica. She'll always go down in history as one of the good moms who prayed with tears for her son.
Mm-hmm. And
he loved her so much, he prayed back to her after she died. Just a little fun fact. And he got, so at the age of 16, after he'd done really well at school, his father wanted to see him go into law. So he went down to Tagaste or wherever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And at the age of 16. And imagine being 16 on your own in a new town, immorality breakout.
Right.
And
he was consecrated to the task of philosophy, though, at that point already, right?
I think he was going for a law degree, and then he changed track himself towards philosophy.
All right, I see. Yeah.
And it was during those, between 16 and 18, he met the mother of his son, Adeodatus.
Mm.
And so he basically had a child around the age of 18, 19.
Mm.
He became a Manichaean at the age of 19 for 9 years.
Mm-hmm.
Then he had 2 or 3 years of Neoplatonism.
Mm-hmm.
And then, boom, 33 becomes a Christian under Ambrose alone.
Yeah. So, and that journey is interesting because it's like, it sounds absolutely terrible for us, but it's almost like a positive step each time, in that he's going from this complete and utter, because I know he looked firstly at one of his big original sort of turnaways from Christianity was just Old Testament. Freaked him out. He was already quite on that Greek thought train, and so he was just very opposed to the earthiness of the Old Testament, and just struggled with it, I suppose. Felt it to be unspiritual, and so went in the opposite direction. And obviously Manichaeanism, you got like some heavy dualism going on there, and almost like a Gnostic understanding of things, where everything physical is basically from the darkness, and then the light is your soul. And so very similar to but not quite as good as Neoplatonism. As soon as he goes on to Neoplatonism, he's sort of just a little bit more open to the idea of Christian allegory, which is what Ambrose comes along and does. And he's impressed with Ambrose's allegorizing of the Old Testament, and figures, no, he's good with this. He can buy into it. And then we have his famous conversion story, which he mentions in this book. Of course, the whole it's almost like it makes me think of the Puritans, the way they, or at least the Baptists anyway, the way they had to have this big experience. This was like, it's like, even though they've, obviously were saved way prior to that experience. Anyone who reads their biography can tell that they were reared under a Christian sort of upbringing in a Puritan household, and loved the Lord from like the age of 6. But unless they had that experience, they weren't converted. Their assurance
became their conversion story.
Yeah. And so he had something similar almost, because I know Augustine's it wasn't his friend, but a Neoplatonic thinker, or someone big in the Neoplatonist world at the time, became a Christian. And I know there was some big moment for him. I think there was something going on there. And anyway, so yeah, I think, he was obviously feeling the pressure to kind of follow suit, but without the experience and so forth. And then anyways, I think we might even get to read it now, but he's out in the, I always think of the backyard, but that's probably not right. He's hearing some kids play, and he's like, wait a minute, kids don't play that game. They're saying, take
up and read.
It sounds like something from Clockwork Orange, or like a full-on, take and read.
Tolelege.
It's a super weird, creepy sort of like, Amityville horror vibe,
Yeah.
I'm just like, and then he's like, oh, wait a minute, maybe I should read. And he reads.
And then he played biblical roulette. Finger landed on the verse.
Yeah.
Boom, the right verse.
I know.
Put on Christ, Romans 13. Yeah.
All sorts of interesting stuff. So we should talk about that as well. We'll get there in the text. Anyway, so he's obviously one of the big dudes from that point on. He is the greatest Christian theologian. What's that?
Isn't he the biggest?
I think he's the biggest. I think he's the mountaintop. Yeah. After Paul comes Augustine, right?
Yeah.
It's just how it works.
Until Aquinas, he is the shadow over the whole church.
That's true. And like really, I mean, he's the father of the Western church, but like at the end of the day, we say that thinking of Protestantism, I mean, it's almost like someone said it this way. Protestants have taken on his soteriology and Catholics have taken on his ecclesiology. And I think that's a good way to put it. There's, so he, even if you think about the Reformation and the what do they call it? The anti-Reformation, or what was it called again?
Counter-Reformation.
Counter-Reformation, thank you.
Yeah.
Both of them were really, Augustinian revivals, which is...
Well, so basically a lot of people say that, you can credit almost any Christian belief to Augustine.
Yeah, wow.
So although he may not have originated most of it, he articulated most of it. So whether it's the fallibility of the Pope, whether it's the perpetual virginity of Mary, whether it's, in terms of the sacraments,
amazing,
or whether it's grace, or whether it's, articulating a good theology of evil. He's spoken about everything. So, yeah.
That was the big thing he took on from his Neoplatonism as well, that articulation of evil. That was big for him. I remember looking at that. But also just reading, through confessions. And so, I mean, he wrote more than you could ever read in your lifetime, but just the big ones. I was amazed. Like you're seeing stuff that is so familiar all the time, and you realize, it's often credited to someone else later on, but actually it's there. It's latent in his thinking. You can actually see it. Even things like René Descartes, and there's just all, and then even psychology, and things like that. In fact, people often talk about this as being the first book of psychology, really, which is interesting.
The first autobiography that's introspective.
Yeah. So one of the cool, if anyone is listening to this planning to do a psychology master's or something, you could cheat. You could do Augustine, you could do theology and psychology. So that's just something to think about.
Cheat there. Yeah.
All right. So with that in mind, let's get started. So you're going to read we're just going to jump around and do our normal.
So the most famous chapter is Book 1, Chapter 1, Paragraph 1. And I've got an old English version, so forgive the these and thous.
All right.
Great art thou, O Lord, and greatly to be praised. Great is thy power, and of thy wisdom there is no end. And man, being a part of thy creation, desires to praise thee. Man who bears about him his mortality, the witness of his sin, even the witness that thou resistest the proud. Yet man, this part of thy creation, desires to praise thee. Thou movest us to delight in praising thee. For thou hast formed us for thyself, and our hearts are restless till they find rest in thee. Lord, teach me to know and understand which of these should be first, to call on thee or to praise thee, and likewise to know thee or to call upon thee. But who is there that calls upon thee without knowing thee? For he that knows thee not may call upon thee as other than thou art. Or perhaps we call on thee that we may know thee. But how shall they call on him in whom they have not believed? Or how shall they believe without a preacher? And those who seek the Lord shall praise him. For those who seek shall find him, and those who find him shall praise him. Let me seek thee, Lord, in calling on thee, and call on thee in believing in thee. For thou hast preached unto us. O Lord, my faith calls on thee, that faith that thou hast imparted to me, which thou hast breathed into me through the incarnation of thy Son, through the ministry of thy creature.
Beautiful. The key one there being, we're not content. You made us for yourself, and we cannot find rest until we find rest.
That's the famous opening chapter.
And even that, you think about, that anticipates a lot of what C.S. Lewis is going to really major on, and so they were seeing the beginnings of
the argument from desire.
Yeah.
It's a key apologetical move. Yeah,
totally. So what a great paragraph it is. And it's almost I love it as well with the whole just the way it intersects with some really not two kingdom but more Kleinian thought, I suppose, or just covenantal thought, where you've got this, we're created for God, but I mean we need to put that into its original covenantal context. That meant not just swirling around in some emotional frenzy, right? That meant all of those things that the the covenant of works originally mandated for us, the richness, the fulfillment involved in the dominion that we would have, the project that we would set out to do, the building of the great city, and so forth. And you see in Ecclesiastes where, now this is frustrated, and yet eternity is set upon the heart, and there's just no point in it all. It's all futile, and we can't rest until we understand, hey, fear God and obey his commandments. This is the end of the matter. And so there's just all of that Ecclesiastes sort of covenantal idea going through. I love that. Yeah.
Another thing that struck me is it sounds like, in a systematic theology, do you start with the word or do you start with the doctrine of God?
Right.
Is it the general revelation or special revelation? And it seems that he's, even just epistemologically, he's just starting in the logical place. True. Just taking all of those things that, how can I call on the God I don't know? But maybe I have to call on him to know him.
Yeah.
And he's just
it's got that feel for sure.
Just rotating around he knows what's important, and he's just roaming around those ideas and just ruminating over them, and you're just digesting them with him. I just love it.
Interesting. It's kind of like, there's just actually thinking about Calvin's opening there as well, and
exactly.
And the two greats start off that way, Interesting. Yeah, it is a big question. It is like the obvious starting point. All right, so we got a few paragraphs. Let me jump straight in and try and remember to, okay, let's go. This is book 2, if you are following in whatever you've got. I've got the more contemporary, updated version. So book 2, this is chapter 1, paragraph 1. I must now carry my thoughts back to the abominable things I did in those days, the sins of the flesh, which defiled my soul. I do this, my God, not because I love these sins, but so that I may love you. For love of your love, I shall retrace my wicked ways. The memory is bitter, but it will help me to savor your sweetness, the sweetness that does not deceive, but it brings real joy and never fails. And then maybe I'll just go ahead and just jump straight into the first paragraph of the next chapter, because it sort of starts us off on that journey, those things he doesn't want to talk about. And it's kind of what you were mentioning earlier. I went to Carthage, he says, where I found myself in the midst of a hissing cauldron of lust. There we go, right? Man, just wait till we get to the end of this. It's so powerful. I had not yet fallen in love, but I was in love with the idea of it. And this feeling that something was missing made me despise myself for not being more anxious to satisfy the need. I began to look around for some object for my love, since I badly wanted to love something. I had no liking for the safe path, without pitfalls. For although my real need was for you, my God, who are the food of the soul, I was not aware of this hunger. I felt no need for the food that does not perish, not because I had my fill of it, but because the more I was starved of it, the less palatable it seemed. So I muddied the stream of friendship with the filth of lewdness and clouded its clear waters with hell's black river of lust. Wow. I mean, I don't know if you could ever forget that, right? Hell's black river of lust.
Hell's black river of lust.
We actually come up with some pretty solid death metal titles, right?
Awesome.
It's amazing. Who knew? You just need to go to the classics to find them.
Mother of Malice.
Yeah, exactly. The Black River of Lust. But isn't that so crazy? Now, this is one thing. Obviously, it's sort of the beginning of the idea of sharing your testimony, I suppose you might say, in the way that we think about it now. And he's rolling through it and just sort of ruminating on what happened, the sweetness of God's grace in light of all of this, and considering God's providence. But there is like a bit of, just a difficult thing to hear about, because, you mentioned he had this kid, and he obviously did find some measure of love, even though it was lustful in that it was unlawful and so forth. But what compounded the issue is that you can see it toward the end, that he was just, the idea, he knew that he was eventually sold on the idea of Christianity, but he was not sold on the idea of celibacy. And so that kept him in this limbo, for a lot longer than it should have. And almost created this problem that wouldn't have existed without the the idea that you know needed to jump in at that, you know, if you wanted to be a true Christian, you had to, you know, remain celibate. And so that's just such a tragedy at some level, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah,
you know,
totally.
he could have just married this chick. You know what I mean? And just had this like really awesome family life. Like, I'm
Changed
appreciative we got
all
Augustine.
church.
Yes,
Yeah.
I know. Like, I'm thankful that he didn't, you know, that we got all the books and stuff. But like, poor guy. I mean, oh my goodness, I wouldn't want to wish that upon anyone, you know, because he had to eventually just break from her, you know, completely. And
He kept his son, but he put her away.
yeah,
Because like he got baptized. I think his son went with him. When he traveled around in his early Christian days, his son went with him. So yeah,
I wonder if
kept
that
his
was,
son, but
what if it was
not the
kind of
mother.
the Ezra thing, you know, the whole put your unbelieving wives away.
Well,
kind
it's
of-
interesting because when he put his, you know, he was struggling with lust and he put her away, and then he took up another girlfriend. So
So
he shacked
yeah,
up again with another chick. So maybe he thought that was like a formal divorce. Who knows?
but
He
I'm
doesn't-
thinking like that's all just part of the problem, because I mean, you know, basically he obviously did not have the gift of celibacy. Do you know what I mean? And so if you are going to go down that road, it's obviously going to be fraught with trouble, and you know, do stupid things like that. But the thing also is just, you know, you think about the New Testament approach in that, you know, even if you're polygamous or you've got, you know, okay, fine, don't be an elder, but don't get divorced or don't put your wives away.
Keep all 7 wives. Be faithful to them all.
I mean, it's such a liberal policy at that level, you know, and yet Yuri's struggling with. It just shows how things had gone pretty weird already.
Yeah.
You
I
know?
mean, today if someone came into your church and a woman, and she'd had a child with a guy, the guy wasn't saved and she was, you know, you'd say marry, even though he's not a believer. You know, fault lies the family that's being created.
Totally, absolutely.
You know, that's we wouldn't see it as unequal yoking. You know, because they're not starting cold or from fresh.
Right.
There's a family there that needs to be formalized.
Yeah. Amen. So, you know, there's all that stuff. I mean, I know he was impressed with the life of Anthony, and you know, that was a big thing for him. Yeah, like, but even that, you know, what he was impressed with, interestingly, I remember looking at this, was that Anthony, if you remember, went to church. I can't remember where he heard it, but heard this. I think it was in a sermon of some sort, where he heard the text read, you know, go and sell all you have and give to the poor, and then come back. And he literally felt that to be a word to himself. Did that, which, you know, now we look at that, that's all on shaky ground. It's not even like, fine, you know. So now you got a double shaky ground thing going on, in that this is influencing Augustine to go through tremendous amount of trouble.
Do you know Augustine sold all his possessions as well?
Did he really? Yeah, well,
yeah, he went back to Gasti, where his father was, sold it all up, and basically started a little monastery with some friends. Yeah, that's how he began his Christian life as a master.
Because he was forcibly put into that office in Hippo.
Yeah. So he was in Hippo in the church, and the crowds grabbed him, and he was weeping. He didn't want to be ordained, and then he submitted in tears.
The story goes like he avoided. He would check if a city had a bishop before he would go there, because he wanted to avoid cities without bishops for fear of that very thing happening. So
that's just madness. I mean, I'm happy that there's a congregational element, but I mean, you know, come on.
Wow, that's congregationalism at the next level. But I think it's actually probably more like a top-down thing at some level, in that you would have to, you know, you'd have to play ball at that point, otherwise you're in trouble with the big cheese. I don't know. I don't know how it goes. But anyway, so yeah, lots to say there. But it's just such a, oh my goodness. I mean, you almost ache for the poor guy, especially the way he describes it. You know, at certain portions, like it was like tearing soul from flesh. You know, to put his wife, or he's not his wife away, but you know, his, you know.
Just what I loved in what you just read there was, you know, just his understanding of sin. You know, I had a desire for you, but I try to fill it with other loves.
Yeah.
That misdirected love, it's a major motif in Augustine's understanding of sin.
Mm-hmm, absolutely.
And so people like Tim Keller, they really developed this notion of sin as idolatry. Yeah. And it's a really helpful idea. You know, it's what you're giving your heart to.
Yeah.
So sin, yes, it's defined as lawlessness. We're not denying that in any way. But another way to approach it is what are you loving with your heart, and what are you
Right.
made to love?
Yeah, exactly. His whole two cities thing is literally two loves, the whole people who love God, people who love the world. That's basically the two cities right there. So yeah, it's a big idea. Anyway, cool. Let's read a little bit on, and then we'll come back
Cool.
and if there's anything more there. All right. So now I'm jumping all the way to book 8, and in chapter 5, paragraph 10. When your servant, now I think I'm saying this right, Simplicanus,
Yes.
I want to go
Plicanus. Just run at it. We run at it.
Simplicianus.
This one.
No, that's a Simplici.
Now it's done.
How would they do it? They'll go Simplicianus. That's how it would be. There we go.
Okay.
When your servant Simplicianus told me the story of, here's another guy, Victorinus, but it would probably be Victorinus.
Yeah.
Victorinus. Something like that. What's that?
Victorinus.
Victorinus. Simplicanius told me about Victorinus. No. I began to glow with fervor to imitate him. Oh, that was the guy I was telling you about. Yeah. That was the guy.
Yeah.
I think it was Simplicanius, or whatever I said earlier, who Simplicianus. Sorry, that's it. Simplicianus. It sounds like something like Afrikaans. Yeah, Simplicianus. It sounds so great. Simplicianus. If you are from South Africa, you better be laughing at that. That's all I'm saying. All right. So Simplicianus, we're running with that. I think he was the Neoplatonist guy.
Yeah.
Or someone else. Anyway. I longed to do the same, but I was held fast, not in fetters clamped upon me by another, but by my own will, which had the strength of iron chains. The enemy held my will in his power, and from it he had made a chain and shackled me. For my will was perverse, and lust had grown from it. And when I gave in to lust, habit was born. And when I did not resist the habit, it became a necessity. It's big. That's like bondage of the world, everything, freedom of the world.
Well, just a perfect description of the progression of sin. So it starts with thought, habit, bondage.
Yeah. I mean, but even at a deeper level, I mean, your whole corrupt nature. I mean, this is it. Like, we're not, when you talk about the freedom of the will, what I always tell people with the whole Calvinism thing is that you do, the cage stage Calvinist kind of vibe where, well, don't you know we don't have a free will, and they just jump straight into fatalism, and you've got to emphasize, no, bondage of the will doesn't mean we don't have a free will. We do, and with our free will, we choose evil only, ever, continually, freely. Though we love it, we love it. We freely choose it, and then the thing that chains us is our own nature, in that, the strength of our own corruption, which
willful bondage.
Like a willful idea is so important there. My will was perverse, and lust had grown from it. So even at just that basic habit, the habitus, you've got this this really strong total depravity idea there. But then, of course, as you say, even just in terms of fighting sin, at the habitual level. Yeah. Is that it? You're done.
Yeah, I'm just sorry. My eyes I found Victorinus. Looks like he was a martyr. He was a sometime professor of rhetoric at Rome who died a Christian.
Right.
So.
Okay. Oh, yeah, totally. He's the guy. I think so I'm mixing up my stories now, but yeah, basically his buddies, he looked up to them, and they went over and became Christians. So he wanted to follow suit. All right, cool. He says, I was quite sure that it was better for me to give myself up to your love than to surrender to my own lust. But while I wanted to follow the first course, I was convinced that it was right. I was still a slave to the pleasures of the second. I had no answer to make when you said, awake, you who sleep, and arise from the dead, and Christ shall give you light. You used all means to prove the truth of your words. And now that I was convinced that they were true, the only answers that I could give were drowsy words of an idler. Soon, presently, let me wait a little longer. But soon was not soon, and a little longer grew to a much longer. For the rule of sin is the force of habit, by which the mind is swept along and held fast even against its will, yet deservedly, because it fell into the habit of its own accord. Also very good. That was
just the complexity of it's the wretched man of Romans 7. Just
yes,
the complexity of
brilliant.
know what's right, but I'm not going to do it. There's just this just great analysis.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like you can, and it's so, it's so comfortable for Reformed guys to read this as well, because it's just, we're in home turf right now, in terms of this sort of thing. This is why they all just wanted, developed Augustine essentially, because he had just wrestled with it. It is crazy that he was just why was he not just totally 100% Calvin and Luther at the same time? It's hard to imagine that he wouldn't be like this justification par excellence guy,
Well, the Latin word justificare literally means to make righteous,
right?
Not to declare righteous.
Yeah.
And so it was Melanchthon who helped Luther to articulate the forensic aspect.
Right.
So the Latin lends itself to a transformative definition where you actually make righteous. So there's the process of transformation. Yeah, whereas Melanchthon nailed the forensic aspect by going back to the Greek ad fontes through the Renaissance. They went back to the Greek. So Augustine's lack of Greek and his dependence on Latin, boom.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. That is a good insight because he's well known for like not really nailing the Latin thing. Even on the Trinity, he busts up a little bit as he's trying to follow them. He's just like the Eastern Fathers are getting him. He doesn't understand what they're saying. He misinterprets them all the time, and kind of, and you have these two streams develop, largely based on the languages involved. And so, you can see how it crippled him a little bit there. He would have been. It's almost like he would have been that guy, if he had just. Can you imagine Augustine nailing the Greek as well? Hold me back. That'd be awesome. But I suppose not everyone gets everything, so that's good. All right. Now, I'm sorry, I've been on chapter 12. I didn't mention, chapter 8. So still in book 5. The last one was chapter 12. And this is chapter 29 in the same book, or same chapter. No, this is paragraph 29 in the same chapter 12. I was asking myself these questions, weeping all the while with the most bitter sorrow in my heart, when all at once I heard the sing-song voice of a child in a nearby house. Now, you see the horror music? It's like a horror scene. Sing-song, la, 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 la. No, but I can't
Freddy Krueger, Nightmare on Elm.
I'm messed up when I read this. I'm not even normal.
1, 2, Freddy's after you. 3, 4, he's at the door.
I know. It's like you don't want to mess up this holy moment. Now we're doing that for everyone who's listening to this as well. Sorry. All right. But anyways. Yeah, I did. Okay, sing-song voice of a child in a nearby house. Whether it was a voice of a boy or a girl, I cannot say. But again and again, it repeated the refrain. Take it and read. Take it and read. At this I looked up, thinking hard whether there was any kind of game in which children used to chant words like these. But I could not remember ever hearing them before. I stemmed my flood of tears and stood up, telling myself that this could only be a divine command to open my book of scripture and read the first passage on which my eyes should fall. For I had heard the story of Antony, there we go, and I remembered how he had happened to go to church. Oh, here it is. Cool. How he had happened to go to church while the gospel was being read and had taken it as a counsel addressed to himself when he heard the words, "Go home and sell all that belongs to you, give it to the poor, and so the treasure that you have shall be in heaven. Then come back and follow me." Now, is that talking about the rich young lawyer? Is that the... Because that would be crazy. The rich young ruler guy? Is that the text? Is it? Matthew 9, 19:21.
Mark 10, yeah.
Mark 10. That would be insane. Like, it's just actually quite... Like, it's just dawned on me, right? He went... Even the way he puts it here, he went to church while the gospel was being read. Okay, now this is the law part of the gospel that's like meant to drive them to the gospel. And he goes, law, awesome. So I'll just go and do the thing that's meant to like smother. He's like doing what Israel, he's doing what Israel did. Like turning the Mosaic covenant into a source of pride. So that's, anyway, so the whole thing is pretty messed up at that level, Anyway.
The same thing happened to me.
Okay, do share.
I was tripping out on acid
Okay.
on a Thursday night, and there was this marriage seminar going on at Ray McCauley's church.
Right.
And I was having the worst trip of my life, and I thought I need to be on holy ground because vampires and demons and stuff,
Right.
they don't go to church.
For
So
sure.
I'm like, okay, I better go sit in the car park. And so they kicked me out 3 times, really. And I'm like this hobo with my guitar and no shoes, traipsing around the suburbs at night. So like I go into the building because I'm convinced I've got to be in church. And this guy turns to me and he says, "Do not lust with your eyes." I ran out the building. I literally ran out the building.
Wow.
So carrying on.
Well, and that's a great point to bring up. I got a story about when I was a youth pastor, and a weird guy rocks up at the church. Just like it sounds like exactly what you did, and I was the guy who told the other guy something weird. But anyway, we'll come back to that. At that level, it's just a profound. I mean, God providentially uses whatever's going at the time, and so we know that, right? So I'm not calling into question the authenticity of his experience or anything like that, but it is just crazy how God has to use everything in spite of us rather than because we're nailing the interpretation of things or whatever. Anyways, he says, by this divine pronouncement, he had all at once, you're talking about Anthony now, he had all at once been converted to you. So I hurried back to the place where Elpius was sitting. For when I stood up to move away, I had put down the book containing Paul's epistles. I seized it and opened it. And in silence, I read the first passage on which my eyes fell. Not in reveling and drunkenness, not in lust and wantonness, not in quarrels and rivalries. Rather, arm yourselves with the Lord Jesus Christ. Spend no more thought on nature and nature's appetites. I had no wish to read more and no need to do so. For in an instant, as I came to the end of the sentence, it was as though the light of confidence flooded into my heart and all the darkness of doubt was dispelled. So I have a few, again, that's it. Okay. Now I got a few thoughts there, which, again, in reverence for the great St. Augustine, right? It's not like I'm trying to take your mind here. But I suppose this is in line and in keeping with those Puritan testimonies and that sort of thing. They become so famous, they become almost like our sort of, law, in that sense. Yeah, you can't touch them. And they become a little bit unhelpful sometimes because, I mean, not only is he getting converted by law, again, not gospel, we'll leave that aside. There's that. But
Make no provision for flesh, bad exegesis.
Right. It's just like solid, full on, commandment, which is supposed to kill you. But, saved him. So there's that. But the other thing is that this moment, I mean, I've seen this actually work against authentic salvation, or becomes a crippling thing for people that are actually, I think, totally, fully, 100% giving themselves over to Christ, but feel that they are actually not there, or they're waiting for this moment, or they're just, how can I be the only one that doesn't have this? And I think obviously the Reformed guys have been good and maybe a little too good in sort of killing that off and saying, especially with the covenant children thing. I mean, in Reformed circles, it's just basically like good Christian nurture, and you just keep on living, and you're not waiting for this cataclysmic at least experience. And Baptists are a little bit more, hey, we're having a conversion over here, so we even expect just a little bit from our kids, just something, just give us anything, But it's a point that I think everyone has to hold in check, one way or another. Obviously, there is. It can be true that someone is truly converted prior to their consciousness dawning on them, so that can certainly happen. Yeah. And in that case, it'd be futile for them to look for a conversion experience. And so, you don't want to have them feel that way, or, call them into question on any of that if they haven't had something like that. But, ordinarily, there is going to be a little bit of a crisis point. As you decide you're going to take Christianity really seriously, and you're going to give yourself over to Christ. But even there, it's not like like the language flooded with light, a light of confidence at least flooded my heart. Now I get
infused my heart, all the gloom of doubt vanished away.
I know, it reminds me of that hymn, I dare not trust the sweetest frame, but lean only on Jesus' name, or something along those lines.
I always thought that was like a good build. Sweetest frame.
Yeah.
I got the sweetest frame, or it's actually the sweetest frame of mind.
Yeah. Well, just the sweetest,
Or frame of heart.
even this little, what did,
Did not trust the sweetest frame. I did not look at beautiful people and trust them.
Yeah. But the other thing, like Spurgeon said, I something along these lines, he would have said it beautifully and all that. So I'm not going to just paraphrase, but basically, give me 1 ounce of faith for a pound of experience, or 10 pounds of experience probably would have been a better way to put it. But, it's like all of that stuff amounts to a moment that's going to fizzle out, at the end of the day. And like as powerful as those things, I mean, and I've had them, you've had them, we've all had them. Yeah. But you really do realize that if you had to trust on that, you're just done for. Before you even get started out the gate, you're done. And a lot of charismatic theology just builds on this thing, or a lot of Baptist theology builds on this thing. And you got to be very, very careful with it. Because at the end of the day, if we're going to look back and theologically assess Augustine's life, bottom line is he wasn't converted like that. What was actually happening was much broader and much more involved, and incorporated all he already knew and had everything to do with the preaching it already had. And a lot was dawning in that moment. And even that wasn't this, when he says, as nice as he might have felt in that moment, which there's no reason to doubt.
Yeah.
It really wasn't the thing that you ultimately are going to value, as you look back on your own life. And if you could somehow see the invisible work of the Spirit, that wouldn't be where the valuable stuff lies. It would be that objective work in the soul that you're probably not even appreciating. So that's just something I thought to add there at the end. Is a good opportunity for us to put that in. Yeah. All right. Well, anything else you want to throw in?
No, just I read my Catholic encyclopedia in preparation for Augustine. It was actually really good. It's really good. So it looks at his life, looked at his writings, and then it looked at his doctrinal development and influence. 3 massive chapters in this encyclopedia.
Wow.
Super interesting. So it just looked at, basically it just showed the timeline of development. It's almost like providentially the development of Augustine's theology, starting with Manichaeism and the problem of evil, and his original wrestlings with Manichaeism. Then there was the Donatist controversy. Mm-hmm. Then there was Pelagius. Mm. Then there was, and so just the development of his doctrines through the controversies. Mm. And how that really providentially, it's almost like at the Reformation, you look at the Westminster in the 1689, you've got the Anabaptists, the Roman Catholics, the Socinians, the Arminians, the perfect set of enemies, which covers the whole spectrum of theological interest. Mm-hmm. And so as you look at the various conflicts that Augustine had throughout his life, it seems that they just set him up perfectly to just talk on the key issues.
Interesting.
So Donatism, for example, he spent years delving into ecclesiology. What is the church? What are the sacraments? What are the offices and the office bearers of the church?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, we've got another Augustine round coming up. I don't know if I told you this, but Augustine's Spirit and the Letter.
Okay.
Which is awesome. I mean, that's like, in terms of covenant theology and stuff, I mean, that's so awesome. So cool. The Spirit and the Letter is what we're looking at next, if anyone's listening to this. And we'll talk a little bit more about Augustine at that point. So it might be a good opportunity to talk a little bit more about his involvements in those things and the rest
Sounds
of
good.
your encyclopedic Catholic knowledge.
Boom.
Nice. All right. That's a fade out for me. Thanks, Nick.
Yeah. Cheers, man.